Welcome to Final Approach with Chris Gregory. I am a philomath who is somebody who loves to learn things. One of the things that I've learned is that everyone has a tale to tell and a lesson to teach. From pilots to farriers to musicians to authors and creators, I'm going to explore my interests while introducing you to some amazing people. Pre-flight is complete and we have clearance, so let's kick the tires and start the fires. David and I go back several decades, having been friends since the start. He has a farrier business in Las Vegas, Nevada, and has become an examiner for the American Furriers Association. We have had him as our examiner in the Heartland a couple of times, and I got to catch up with him in Reno at the 2023 AFA convention. We had a great talk, and you're going to like hearing David's story. We are cleared for takeoff. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you about my good friend David Sierra. David Sierra is an AFA examiner, a former competitor. We've been friends for decades. How long have we known each other, David?
Well, I'd say at least 20 years.
At least, huh?
At least, yeah. Trying to remember when I first, probably at a contest, I'm assuming, when I first met you.
Yeah, had to be early 2000s, late 90s.
Yeah.
How long have you been shoeing?
Full time when I moved to Vegas. So I moved there in 2001.
And that's Las Vegas, Nevada.
Las Vegas, Nevada. Yeah. Prior to that, I was helping out a good friend while we were in college and stuff, just basic stuff, learning to pull shoes and cleaning up. Didn't even know if that's what I wanted to do, but apparently it turned out that way.
Where did you go to college?
At University of New Mexico.
Okay, UNM, Lobos.
Lobos, yeah.
Yeah, Lobo is it's not a lobo tendon on a horse. We're talking about a wolf.
Yeah, the wolf.
So we have some shared heritage growing up in New Mexico. Tell us about your youth.
Well, I was born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Heck, I stayed there till I went to college.
Did you grow up around horses?
I did, a little bit. I played a lot more sports than I did events as far as rodeoing, because I was big into sports. Played a lot of football and baseball primarily.
Okay, what position did you play in football?
I was wide receiver, and then defensive back.
Did you get to play football or baseball in college?
No, I did not. It's a tough gig to try to get into play ball. I was hoping maybe baseball, but I had a good friend that went, but he went to a junior college, so it's tough. And I went to a small private school in Santa Fe, so St. Mike's, I say it's small, but it was wasn't as big as a public school, but we had quite a name in a few sports, especially basketball, but it was harder to get recognized, I think, at that.
Okay. What year did you graduate high school?
92.
92. So a few years behind me. I'm 86 model. What did you study in college?
I studied criminology. I got my bachelor's in criminology and I minored in political science.
No kidding.
Yeah.
What a handy occupational training for a horseshoer, huh?
Yeah. My first year I actually went to Eastern New Mexico University over in Portales.
Yeah. I almost rodeoed for them.
It's a nice little state school that was a good place to go for my first year, I think, because I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends from Santa Fe go there, so did pretty well my first year until I transferred to UNM.
So your grades went down?
They did, because that first semester, I think we spent most of our time probably partying quite a bit. And then it took the rest of my college career to get my GPA back up again. And I had actually planned on going to law school. And this is where we have a tie, because your dad is an attorney.
In New Mexico, yep.
And my dad was as well for many years. Of course, come from a family of attorneys. But I thought that's what I was going to do. And I thought I was going to jump right in, but it didn't work out that way.
I do have an associate's degree in pre-law.
Okay.
And I often thank God that I did not become a lawyer. How about you?
Oh, same thing. I think that the study of laws and different, all the gray areas, I find that fascinating, but I don't know if I would have, there's so many attorneys out there, and a lot of them are, I hate to use that term, ambulance chasers, but like in Vegas, that's all we, have. And my dad he did a lot of civil law, but he did do some defense as well, but he studied a lot of the big time attorneys there, and that were great trial lawyers, because it takes, the stuff we see on TV is totally different than the real life. And those guys they're good at what they do.
Now, was your dad a one horse show or part of a firm, or?
No, he was a one horse kind of guy.
So was mine.
He had another guy that I guess they kind of partnered with for many years, a good friend of his. He did work for the state too. He did stuff like that, but he was a JAG in the Air Force during Vietnam, so that helped him out quite a bit. Yeah.
Oh, okay. My dad's a brilliant guy. Have I told you the story about how he became a lawyer?
No.
Well, he went to basic training, and the top few guys at basic got to go to officers candidate school, OCS. And then the top guys at OCS, they got to go to executive officer school. So he was in during Vietnam and ended up going to officer candidate school. He became a field artillery officer, and he's an executive officer out there in Fort Irwin, which is Death Valley.
Okay.
Out in, that's where I was born. And while he was executive officer for that field artillery unit, he kind of represented one of his soldiers and beat the JAG officers. And he thought that was pretty cool. And he got out of the military, and UNM had this deal for GIs that allowed him to go to law school. And he said, well, I kind of enjoyed his first taste of lawyering, I guess. And so then he became a lawyer and started his practice in Vegas. Really a cool story. It's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Your dad was he already a lawyer when he was in the military?
Well, no. Well, let's see what happened. Because so my dad's from Vermont. That side of the family is all from the Northeast.
Well, how did he end up in New Mexico? Wow.
His first marriage. So he went to Iowa, to Drake University, and then he was planning on finishing law school there. Well, his first wife was a nurse. She got a job at UNM Hospital. So he transferred to UNM to finish out his law school. And he was in ROTC. So when he finished law school, he went directly into the Air Force, and obviously was a JAG. So that's how he ended up there, and then got divorced. And I think his ex-wife moved back to somewhere in the Midwest, and then he stayed and met my mom a few years later.
Okay, so that was really ancient history, huh?
Yeah, so it's, and of course, my mom's from New Mexico. She's, we've got on my grandmother's side, so her mom, most of them were all from the Espanola area, and then my grandfather's side, her dad, all from the Las Vegas area, where you're from. So
right, are you half Hispanic?
Oh yeah,
yeah. So Coyotito.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yo también.
Well, and it was interesting. My mom was always big into genealogy because she had just curious about everything and family heritage in New Mexico and everything. And so a few years ago, she made me do
You did the saliva test?
23andMe or whatever it was. Yeah. And it turns out, which we figured, but it was 80 some percent. Well, Spanish, obviously, because of course my dad's family's from Spain. And so that's just a big chunk of it.
All right.
And with the huge Spanish influence in New Mexico, I mean, it's kind of...
We did the 23andMe as well. And I am, so I was registered with the Creek Nation. So I knew I was a Native American. So I had like 11% Indian, 50% Hispanic, this kind of thing. But then the rest of it, I'm like Yakut, I got Jew, North African. I light up the map. They get that colored thing. I light it up everywhere. And my wife, she's one blue dot, the British Isles.
That's funny, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I think I don't remember what the percentage of native is what they had put. I don't, from obviously Indian of some descent, probably, I'm sure Pueblo Indians in there from New Mexico. But I wasn't surprised just because...
Yeah.
There's such a huge mixture in New Mexico anyway.
Yeah, hybrid vigor.
Yeah.
What kind of shoeing do you do?
I primarily shoe the sport horses. I ended up, I don't know how I fell into that. It's just the way it worked out, because Vegas really, when I moved there, there was some barns around, but granted, you're just trying to shoe whatever you can shoe and make money on. And then it just happened to gravitate there.
What year did you move to Las Vegas, Nevada?
2001.
So 23 years ago, 22 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I didn't know anybody there.
Now, how did you end up moving there? That seems like a crazy place to go to.
Yeah, my dad, he wanted to get out of law, so he thought maybe real estate, and he was going to go to Phoenix or Las Vegas, Nevada. And he ended up in Las Vegas and did some real estate, did other things, but he didn't want to practice law anymore. So, and that was in 96, I think. And then, of course, go visit him. And then my sister, she did 1 year at New Mexico State and then transferred to UNLV. She could get in-state tuition or something in Nevada for that. So she did that. And then my mom moved out to help her out. That must have been 99, 2000.
So your whole family ended up out there?
Yeah. I never thought I'd leave New Mexico. So then I ended up out there and put stuff in storage, said I'll just go hang out for a little bit, see what it's like. And then I ended up finding some horseshoers out there and kind of got in with them and just...
Have we got to watch your storage stuff sell on...
Yeah, no, I ended up going back once I realized I was staying and went and picked it up and
right.
Yeah, came back. It was interesting. I knew guys back home like Mike Stone and
Andrew Varela. Yeah.
Andrew. Yeah. And Craig, of course. I always had a phone call to at least make sure I was on the right path, because there wasn't much of a competition scene in Las Vegas at all. Not that I really knew a lot about it, but I wanted to make sure I was
Doing a good job.
staying on the right path. Yeah, because I looked up to the guys back home just because I knew them. I grew up with Mike, and that's kind of how I got started, was through him.
Did you find the standard in Vegas to be lower than New Mexico overall?
No, I think because of the horses, pretty much what I knew from working with those guys was, granted, most of them were just backyards, but they were doing good jobs. I mean, it wasn't obviously no show finish or anything like that, but I mean, the shoes were fit well, at least for what I knew at the time. I didn't know much, but then when I got to Las Vegas, I think the biggest difference was that I don't remember anybody even lighting up a forge. That was new for me.
In Nevada?
In Nevada. I know now that, or later, that there was a guy here or there, but nobody really used it. And so that was new to me, because that's all they did back home.
The guys you were exposed to were all hot shoers. So, and are you still a hot shoer?
Uh-huh.
Yep. And do you make a lot of your own shoes?
I don't anymore. I did when I was competing heavy back, in the 2000s, I was making all my shoes. And, concave, of course, was the easiest to do, as far as, didn't have to full or anything. But I made everything. I'd go home, I'd practice for a contest, always make a set of shoes to put on the truck, different sizes. And then, of course, once I got everything where everything was in handmades and I had to make a new shoe, it was easy. I already knew the measurements, or I had them on the truck from making them in the shop. So I did that for a little while. Then I ended up breaking my hand. I had a horse pull back and cross ties, and the cross tie came back and pulled my hand right into the side of the stall. Yeah. And so I was out for a little bit. So I had to have surgery. But the apprentice I had at the time, I kind of just had to throw him in to kind of trim some feet for me. Let's see, I think it was my right hand. So my hammer hand. So I could still actually pick up a hammer, let it drop, and shape the shoe, which made it easy. Yeah. And everything was hot. So I was able to do that. That's when I kind of got back into using keg shoes. And then I just never really got out of it.
Yeah. They can make life easier for sure.
Mm-hmm. And that was it. I pretty much I've kind of done that all.
So the hard feet that has been your career, I don't think I would have ever been able to enjoy shoeing as much as I have if I would have had the hard feet you've dealt with your whole career. Do you mind those hard feet?
When my wrist hurts, we have about 2 times a year where it's just miserable. And it seems to be when it goes from winter to spring or summer. And then like now, where we're kind of transitioning into winter. But most of the time, they're still hard, but there are times when it's harder, like now. But
so the dead of summer is not harder?
No, actually, no. We actually get a little bit of, because if we get some rain, we're so hot, we get a little bit of rain, then the humidity goes up to a whopping like 30%, which actually softens the feet up enough to where we can just knife through them pretty easy. But, there's a lot of advantage because our feet stay together well. All you got to do is just keep them collected up. And of course, we grow a lot more vertical depth than other areas.
Right. Yeah, you're going to have less flare.
But if you can just manage those, and
what about white line disease? Do you find it?
I have had some. Most of it that's come in from another area. And one of the old timers that I worked with, he'd been there his whole life, and he had mentioned that we really don't have it out here. But he says what he believes is that some of these horses will knock their foot, and he called it a broken capsule, but it was, where they would, just like if we hit our fingernail with a hammer and then it gets a void in there, and then it creates a breeding ground for some bacteria, because we just don't see, it's just so dry and hot. So
you're not going to have a lot of that in the soil.
Right. So what came first, the chicken or the egg in that,
Yeah.
But I do deal with some that come in and we don't see it right away, but I start to see some stretching in that white line. Then the next thing you know, so, I just resect them. And
what's your biggest problem that you deal with in shoeing?
Well, in my area, it's probably because it's so dry, and I work on a lot of sport horses, the water when they're washing them.
So they're getting their feet wet?
Yeah.
What does that cause to happen?
Well, they're constantly expanding and contracting. So they're dry, they're living in a dry stall, they go and wash them, and then their feet soak up all the water, and then immediately go right back into a dry stall. So it's like putting a sponge out in the sun. And so during the summer, we get a lot more of these feet. They'll go right over the shoes pretty quick. I try to compensate as best I can, but whereas in the wintertime, it's completely opposite. They're not washing them, the feet stay. Like I'll use the wintertime to get my feet
back together.
back together. To me, it's frustrating because the clinches pop up and things like that because they've expanded. But I mean, they don't tear apart. We don't get huge flares, but they just don't look as nice, as they do in the winter.
I've always told my owners that the feet are a little bit like rawhide.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you get rawhide wet, it expands and it'll change shape and it'll be pliable. And then you get it dry and all of a sudden it is like iron. And the shoe and the nails, obviously, they don't move. And so you fit the foot you're presented. And then if the environment changes, the foot changes and you have either a foot drawn up in a loose shoe or a foot out over a shoe that was fit properly the week before.
And that's it. And I think most of it is my own, and I'm sure our audience can understand that as well. Just that because it's your work, you take pride in what you do. And then a short time later, it just doesn't look the same. And it's frustrating because, you wonder, well, what are they thinking? Are they thinking they don't have, good enough horseshoe, that kind of thing.
What about hoof dressing? Do you think a hoof dressing could work or have you tried?
The thing I find is that I tell people put it on the bottom mostly.
What do you like to use?
I don't really care. That sound product seems pretty good. I forget who makes that, but I think any of those that, you just put over right around the hairline. That's what I tell my clients. Yeah.
So not on the bottom, on the hairline.
Either on the bottom underneath on the bottom of the foot, especially like right before they put them back in the stall and the shavings can stick to it, or just put it around the hairline because the rest of the wall doesn't
need it.
Yeah, it's just not doing anything.
Do you think it would help or change the problems with the washing and drying?
So I've had some horses that just did not handle our climate very well, and I would have them put like Crisco or something on the foot before they washed them, so I at least can try to repel some of the water. But I don't
know if it helped that much, huh?
Yeah, there is that product out there. It's the Kevlar Tough that Nolan was making over there. That seemed to work pretty well if you after you shot and put that around, because I think it actually put kind of like a hard shell over the foot. And I noticed with that, it seems to hold it together a little bit better.
All right. And what about lameness issues? Do you have any lameness issues in the sport horses that you deal with more than others?
Well, yeah, primarily we get suspensories, doing a lot of jumpers and dressage horses, but
front end, back end?
Both, actually. Yeah.
Right.
A lot of hock issues, in that area.
So do you have a shoeing suggestion if you're having hock trouble? Do you do anything different?
Well, yes. And it depends on where it is, high or low, or as far as suspensory. But again, once I get the information back from the vet based on what's going on in there, then I decide whether I'm using a suspensory shoe or maybe even just shoe them flat and give them some time off and kind of go. But it depends on what they're trying to do, and how bad it is. Now, obviously, we get horses with DSLD here and there, and it's more prevalent in certain breeds. But I've had some and I didn't understand it because it's just consistently degenerating. So I remember calling Pat Gallahan because he worked with those Arabs all the time. And I would get some of these and I started wondering how to shoe some of these horses with it.
So DSLD is degenerative suspensory ligament disease, just for those that haven't heard that term before. What did he tell you to do?
So he said, actually, since they're not going to get any better, and if you're looking for movement purposes, he said, I'd, just shoe them with a 2-degree wedge pad behind. It'll keep them from, because they stab their foot in the ground quite a bit. He said, try that. And if it doesn't work, then, you can try some other things. But it actually helped, which it didn't matter because the horse wasn't going to get better, right?
Yeah, it's a degenerative disease that they're not going to come back from, but you might manage their, pain or lifestyle a bit.
And that's it.
A little bit like navicular.
Yeah, exactly. So other than that, but on the other ones that, just have a tear or an injury, for me, I usually will go to a suspensory shoe right off the bat.
And do you make those?
Yeah, just make it or weld in a insert.
So those of you that don't know, a suspensory shoe is one that's going to have a wide web through the toe, and then the heels will be thinned out. So you can make it out like 3/8x1 and set down and draw the heels down, or you can make it out of a keg shoe and weld another piece of a keg shoe inside of it. But it works on the principles of web width. So the wide section will float on the ground and the narrow section of the heels will penetrate, and the deep flexor will then take up more of the weight. So the wedge heel shoe on a hind foot, or like a spavin shoe, if you know what that is, I think one of the ways those works is it actually moves the foot behind the horse. And so we have the reciprocal apparatus on the hind end, which the horse, if you change the angle of the foot, the horse's foot will be placed in relation to the body because of that. Those types of shoes do move the feet back. Do you agree?
I agree. Yeah, because you'll see their posture change pretty quick. And as far as in my career, one of the things I found is I just one of the old guys I worked with there in Vegas who's since passed, but he always just said, you have to ask them, right? And I think that we can have something that is worked on 8 or 9 horses, and then you come across something that may not. So I'll have an idea and I will go to that idea something worked for me. But every time I do that, I pay attention to how they're standing, if they seem comfortable. That's the thing I think with shoeing is there's just got to be a lot of common sense just to pay attention for 2 minutes of what they're doing. And if they like it, they'll let you know. And again, some of these injuries, and I mean, it happens with navicular, you'll get something dialed in and you'll be happy. The horse is sound, everything's good. And then next shoeing or 2 shoeings later, whatever you were doing doesn't work anymore. So
there really is not a one size fits all sort of deal.
So I've kind of found that I pay attention to how they're standing, what I do to them, how it affects their body posture. And I mean, working in the horses that are jumping or like dressage, I mean, movement is everything, especially in dressage. So there might be something that might work medically, but it won't work dynamically, right?
Like, give an example of that.
For instance, some of these horses that are, well, actually I had one of my friends who's a vet there, we were talking about one of these horses we were doing was over at the knees.
So over at the knees is whenever the radius is in front of the cannon bone from a lateral view. It can have the look of a calf-kneed horse a little bit, but is that what you understand?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I believe that foot has compensated for that conformation in that his toe might be a little bit longer than normal, or definitely what they would want to see, but it was holding him up, right? I mean, the knees are still over, but you could drop a plumb line down and he was center underneath his body. Well, as soon as you start changing any of that leverage.
So the long toe was helping him from knuckling over.
And he was moving fine. There was nothing wrong with him. I didn't change anything, but he's like, no, I think that needs to go back. And I was telling him, I disagree because of this. And so it was funny because the trainer was like, well, I don't want to change the way he moves because he was moving fine. We have to listen to the horse, right? I mean, if he's unsound, we got to figure out so we can try to help him out to be sound. But in some of these cases, they're not unsound, but they have developed postures and their hoof capsule to compensate for their conformation. And I think we just have to listen to that.
If you have a horse that's over at the knees and from a lateral view, since that cannon bone is behind the radius, if you were to think of it from a textbook perspective, a rocker toe would take stress off of the breakover in this, what we would consider a compromised knee.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying that would have been bad for this horse.
Yeah, because he'd constantly be moving forward faster than his feet could keep up with him. So in that case would be tripping because his toe's shorter as opposed to being longer.
That's a really good answer, David. Hey, I'm glad I asked you down that line.
When I was younger, I couldn't answer them via textbook or from a medical standpoint, but some things you just would pay attention to. And that's where some of my mentors in Vegas were big on. They were just old cowboys. You just got to pay attention. So I learned a lot of that. Then later, of course, I dove into the books. But as far as just every day, I watch a horse walk in and I ask my apprentices, hey, did you notice how he was walking? Because they're just walking him in. I said, you got to pay attention to just the little things. You don't have to watch them for, 50 yards. Just watch how they walk. I said, when they're in the cross ties, when you first put them in, while I'm putting on my apron, I'll just see how they're standing, how they're, and that kind of tells me a little bit if I'm where I'm going to. I already have a game plan before I even get to that horse.
Nice.
Of course, now with the technology we have on our phones, if there's something that I'm trying to work on, we can slow-mo it easily. Just walk down the barn aisle, watch a video, see how they're landing, try to help them land a little flatter if that's what you need to do.
Cool. If you have a horse that's sore and you don't really know much about it, do you have like a standard thing that you'll do? Do you like straight bars? Do you like pads?
In my area, it depends on vertical depth, right? So if I get to a foot and there's no depth under there, that's probably probably just putting a shoe on them, get them up off the ground will take care of that. But if it's kind of a mystery lameness or something, that I'll usually go to some sort of frog support.
Okay. And do you do that with a heart bar or do you do it with a pad?
I usually will hold the heart bar for a little bit after, but I'll start with like a frog support pad, just impression material or something, just get a little frog contact, get that foot working a little bit. I've had the best luck with those. And then now, especially with some of these 3D pads I've played around with them, because they are a little firmer, we're getting some good results.
And do you do them under a bar shoe or under open heel?
Open heel.
All right.
I have taken some with the old Castle Plastic type of frog support, put them in a bar shoe kind of cut that out. I learned that from Travis Coons. He would do that a lot. And I thought that's a great idea because you get kind of a straight bar with a little softer heart bar into it. And I've done that a few times throughout my career, and that works well.
Okay.
I think frog support is a big thing for these horses.
Well, let's change gears a little bit and talk about certification.
Yeah.
How long have you been a journeyman?
Let's see. I got my journeyman in 2006.
2006.
2006, yeah. In New Mexico, as a matter of fact, which was great.
Who's your examiner?
Dusty actually was.
Nice.
I think that was actually the first time I met him.
Okay.
But I went out back to, because that's all I was lacking was my horse. So I went back, spent a couple of days with Mike Stone. We shot some horses, and then I just made some shoes in the shop just to kind of make sure I was tuned up. And then we went out to Tucumcari, and I took the test out there and I passed it. But that one, I think that was my fourth time on the foot, I think. So I was dialing it in because I was, just like anything, the first time I was learning to cut steel as far as proper lengths.
There's a lot of people who get hurt by the chop saw, don't they?
Yeah. So I was, and I was making shoes for horses. But again, what I mean is that I was putting on the handmaids I'd make in the shop, but a lot of them I wasn't cutting them to the foot. And then at the time you're making a keg shoe, and then it's such a process to learn to shape a shoe for the foot, which you've already trimmed, right?
Right. So basically you were making stock, and then whenever you trim the horse, if you need 11-inch shoe, you get 11-inch shoe.
Right.
Truck, which is different than trimming the horse and saying this horse needs an 11-inch shoe.
Correct. So I had to work on that some more. And then I was pretty fortunate. I passed my written, my first go. That might have been Chattanooga back in 2005 or something. That was the area that was my biggest concern just because of the written, and then, but I came off of the certified, and then I immediately took my written at the convention. So all that information was still fresh in my mind. And when I studied for the certified, I actually studied with plans of taking the journeyman. So I was learning terms medically and non-medically. So when I got to my journeyman and I took the test, that stuff was still real fresh. So, and then from that point, I figured, well, I'll do the rest. Then I passed my bar shoe, then my horse finally.
Now you're an examiner.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you see as a candidate's biggest problem in the exams?
Time management.
Okay, explain.
Especially in the journeyman area, right? I feel that not enough candidates compete. So pressure under time and learning to make a shoe that is presentable in a small amount of time. Because I'm seeing that a lot of these candidates, they may be good at trimming feet for the most part. Learning to set them up properly takes a little practice, but they can trim the feet. They can make the shoes. They just don't have the time management because, as you know, from competing, I mean, we're only given a certain amount of time and we're trying to produce our best product in that time. And so you're always under the gun. And plus you're just forced to learn how to make things rather quickly. So that's what I see now.
Do you think they're losing time in their trim, or you think they're losing time in the forging?
I think the whole thing, because they're just not managing their time right. Probably not necessarily getting with people to help them out. There's a lot of people I've asked them, where are you getting your help from? And they're afraid to reach out.
So they're just doing a YouTube video and trying?
In some cases, but the ones that I think truly, and I would say that would be more at the certified level. Now, when we get to the journeyman level, they probably are getting some help, but they probably still don't put enough time in the shop. You've got to make bar shoe because 35 minutes to be able to fit that pattern is a time crunch. And then manage your time wisely. So
if you were laying out a timeline for somebody doing a journeyman horse, do you have a prescription?
Yeah, well, I know it worked for me, but a lot of it was, number one, I would say for me, I knew where my weakest part was, which I would say was on the foot. Like there's guys that I know and gals that can trim a foot beautifully, boom, boom, boom. Takes me a little bit longer. So I knew that was my weaker point. So I needed to figure out a way to give myself as much time on the foot as I could. So I practiced making journeyman shoes in the shop, and I got them down to 3 heat shoes in under 12 minutes a pair.
Is that including clips?
Yes. So I knew that I had where I was at. So I had that part dialed in. And then the rest of it was just sorting out my time on my feet, right? But so I trimmed 2 front feet, dressed them up, measured, cut my steel, and just sat it aside, marked it wherever I needed to mark it. Then I would trim my hind feet. Then before I dressed and measured and cut stock, I put my front shoes in the fire. Then I dressed my hind feet, measured, cut that stock, sat it aside, now my front shoes were ready to be made, and I made them. And then from there, got those, nailed them up, put my hind steel in the fire, finished my front feet, made my hind shoes. And, it was just one of those that hind feet were always easier for me. So I did those rather quick. And I mean, I think on that particular day, I didn't have much adjustments to make on my hind shoes. So it was real quick, boom, and I was done. Considering, going through several times and first time not cutting enough steel and trying to stretch it, and that didn't work, to taking too much time on the foot, too good of marks.
Did you have a time limit, like where you had to be done trimming your front feet at 20 minutes or something like that?
I gave myself 8 minutes a foot.
Okay.
Again, you learn, and I guess it helped because I had the feet I had in Tucumcari were just normal what I had back in Vegas. So there wasn't a lot of trying to make the bottom of the foot pretty. I just knocked out some of the chunky stuff, cleaned up the frogs best I could, spent my time just trying to get it as flat as I could to gain some points. And, it wasn't a lot of gathering, but I had to, cut a little bit of a shape into it and then give myself something to fit.
Well, I like your timeline really well. And what's important is that there was no downtime.
No.
You'll sometimes see a person that they'll trim all 4 feet and then go cut steel, or then call for the examiner while steel's in the fire getting hot. They have taken a 3 to 5 minute chunk out of their exam if they don't manage when to put the steel in the fire.
And that's it. That's what I tell these candidates. And being an examiner and primarily walking around to check on things, I pay attention to that because I find it interesting how everybody does things different. Now, there are those who manage their time well, but the ones that don't, I try to pay attention to where they're losing the time so that later I can give them some information so that they can go home and practice that.
Well, and how much would you pay for 3 to 5 minutes to spare at the end?
Yeah, it's huge. And then, you see it too, being an educator, is they think with their hammer. That's what I tell the guys that I get working on this. I said, don't think with your hammer. I said, you should know what you're doing to that piece of steel before you even pull it out.
Yeah. Bob Marshall used to call them thinking blows.
Yeah.
They're just hitting it for no
reason. Yeah. Or brushing it or doing this. It's like, that's time that you could be
actually progressing.
Yeah. Those are things that I pick up on, and I give the candidates that information.
So you've been an examiner for me a few times, and we've really enjoyed that. In fact, I was going to kind of hit you up. You want to come again in October?
Let's see. What do I have going on? Well, let's tentatively put that on. I'll look, because I never know now with all this stuff going on.
I thought I was going to have them on video saying, yeah, or on audio. Yeah, I'll be there.
But I would love to, because it is fun. I do enjoy doing that. And we do the back-to-backs. And I mean, I think that, like last year was good because I remember seeing some candidates struggle in the first test. Not detrimental to the horse, just struggle doing some things. And because of the new rules that we use, center stock and so forth, I remember telling one of them, I said, after the test was over, we were getting ready to start the other one. I said, you might want to think about your shoe selection is key. This is for certified. I said, because depending on the foot you draw, it's better going to determine how wide your shoe is. I said, everybody uses wide shoes or thin shoes. I said, figure it out when you get your foot. She came back and she passed her certified the next day because her trim was good on the first day, but her shoe selection was not good and it killed her. So I remember mentioning that and to some others. And so they all came back and that helped them out.
Having the 2 exams, it is such a pain. And every time I'm like, I'm never doing it again. But we have the first one on Saturday. And if those people have another shot on Sunday, it is just unbelievable how many passes like a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. This year was the online sign up has been a real hassle for me because in the past, people call me up, say, hey, I'm coming, and they send me a check and I know they're coming. Now with the online deal, all of a sudden I think we did 36 one day and 20 some the second.
Wow.
And having to come up with the horses for that number was just, and then Dusty, thank God, he's just a trooper, that man.
Yeah. Just jump right in and do whatever.
He just worked right through it.
But that's the thing, like my cert back home is usually smaller. So some of the online stuff is easy, it's great for me. And I think that one of the things as an examiner, the positive is we don't have to deal with money. We don't have to deal with a lot of the other paperwork that we did before. But I do understand that because those are things that come up in our meetings about trying to, because now we have deadlines, we got horses and nobody wants, we don't want to turn anybody away. But some areas it's hard to find horses when you have so many candidates,
Having the certification at a horseshoeing school is very handy because you have horses and horse owners that are good with that sort of thing.
Yes. But you get outside of that, it can be difficult.
Well, and then sometimes you go to a place where the guy gets horses he doesn't shoe. He just finds whoever has a horse and brings some real broncs and some really bad feet.
That's the thing. Fortunately, we haven't had to have the vet sedate, at least at several of the, we always get those. And some of them are good horses. They just
The situation.
don't like the sound of the anvils and stuff. But no, I remember even when I was a candidate years ago and we'd go to some places and they were just getting the horses that, they had a mile of foot because they just had to get what they could. And they were from some dude ranch that didn't want to pay $10 to, they were paying $10 to have them shod. And you're like, holy cow.
I passed my journeyman horse in December 1990 in Kansas, and it was freezing cold in indoor Reno. Only 2 people passed anything that day. It was brutal. And that horse shattered my shoeing box, broke my watch. I had stuff scattered all over that arena. It was, that was a rank booger.
Yeah.
Little old gray horse. I don't know if he had ever been shod before that day. I don't think it had ever been hot.
And I think that's how it was. And now that time's gone on, I think we've definitely said, okay, we need to have better horses, because, as a candidate, it's tough enough as it is you're nervous, this and that.
Just trying to do your good work anyway.
You may have great horsemanship skills, but you're nerved up and it's just, so it's just the way it goes. But for the most part, I enjoy doing it. And I think when, like itchers, when they're back to back, because they take that information you've given them immediately and they can apply it immediately. So today and tomorrow, and you see improvement.
Yep.
And it's okay if you don't pass, but as long as you see some improvement, move on to the next test and go from there, build on it. Because that's what it is, right? I mean, our certification it's just letters, but it's the journey that we do.
The journey is way more important than the letters.
It is. And the people you meet, just from when I was competing to going through my certification process, I wouldn't be where I am today without all the people in my career. Even if I talk to them at the bar for 5 minutes or whether I've gone and worked with them and hung out with them for, most of my career.
So what do you see for the future of horseshoeing in the United States? You think we're going to stay strong and get stronger, or are we disappearing?
I think we're going to get stronger. I'm seeing a lot. I mean, just look at the amount of people who've trying to get their AW and where that's kind of come from. And I think you're still going to always have a certain percentage of people who, when I say on the upper echelon, that are always educating themselves or working with others to get better, always, right? You're always going to have that percentage. And I don't think that's ever going to change. I think it's going to get bigger, but then you're going to have the other lower part of that pyramid, I guess, that are just going to always be static. But I think in general, I'm seeing more farriers wanting to become educated or increase the education, which they already have.
You think the middle is going to become a higher average?
I do.
What about the horse industry? Is it continuing?
Oh gosh, I think it's just going to grow.
Yeah.
I think it is. Whether it's anything that happens in it, and I heard Dusty's podcast the other day, and I think he's right that just Yellowstone or just anything. And I mean, even I was always busy, but during the pandemic, it was like people were finding other things to do that they were not used to doing, meaning because of the pandemic. So they maybe got into horses.
If you were anywhere around a horse in the pandemic, you were busy.
Yes.
Yeah. Every part of the industry.
The horse industry in the United States, I still think is one of the leading moneymakers in the country. I mean, you have tack, you have feed, you have veterinarians, you have farriers, you have chiropractors, you have body workers, whatever it is. Anything that has to do with horses is just, it's a industry filled with.
There's a lot more work than there are workers.
Yes.
So do you have any plans on retirement? Are you thinking about it? Or?
Well, I always figured my plan for retirement is just slowing down, even if it's doing 1 or 2 a day. But, I'm constantly thinking about things and I'm not really sure yet.
So are you 50 yet?
50, just turned 50. So, I mean, as far as, setting money aside, but getting out of the industry would just be tough, I think, for me. And I have slowed down a little bit over the last few years, meaning I'm doing less during the day. I've always carried help. I enjoy it. I think that I enjoy having company when I'm working and they do as well, but it just makes the day go smoother. It's safer. I think it is
definitely that
safer, but just slow down. We used to do quite a bit more with the team of on these sport horses, and they're a lot bigger but now I find that I've cut it down and I have more time to go fix a shoe if I need to and things like that I, we'd be done at 5, 6, 7 at night. Then I got to go do this. It wasn't good.
So you're enjoying it more?
I am enjoying it more.
That's cool.
I always enjoyed it then because I think as busy as I was and trying to manage my time to compete, to do things, and family, of course, I had a lot less downtime. But now I think I've as got into my older years, I'm learning to see the forest through the trees a little bit better. And I do. I get up and I enjoy that day, and then, look forward to it and so forth.
If you could go back and explore another field, what would it have been?
I'd say probably law, I think.
As far as law enforcement?
Oh, probably practicing law.
Oh, practicing law.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, the law enforcement, I did look at that. That was some interest, but probably now that you said it, got me thinking, if I had to go back and do something, I don't know, maybe the military. My dad was in it. I didn't. And now, of course, my son's in the Navy. But I look back, man, just think of all the other places I could have traveled to see on government's dime. But now, I mean, being a farrier and traveling around, I'm fortunate. I get to go places that I never thought I'd go, whether it's in the United States or I went to New Zealand a few years ago. And
horses have feet all over the world.
They do. So really, anywhere I go, I probably would have a job.
Well, and here we are in Reno, and it's the AFA convention. It's a bunch of guys out there. It's a bigger crowd than I was thinking it was going to be.
It is, and I think the numbers are up quite a bit this year from what I heard. So I think that's a good thing, and it's easy to get to.
I was at Stoneleigh in England about 10 days ago, and they had like 1,200 farriers there. It was massive. It was pretty cool.
That's big. Yeah, they run some big contests over there, don't they?
Well, it's always been the internationals. Every time I've been, it was a big contest as far as that goes, but the rest of it was not that big. This year they had speakers, and well, they've always had speakers too, but they had the trade show that was huge, and I mean they're really doing some incredible stuff out there. You got a dad joke for me?
Yeah. What did the duck say when he bought some chapstick?
Tell me.
Just put it on my bill.
I heard the similar joke where a duck was in a pharmacy, and he was buying condoms, and the pharmacist said, "Would you like me to put that on your bill?" And he said, "No. What kind of duck do you think I am?"
In the heat of the moment to think of one, it's always difficult, but I know I always have quite those, because I'll get my kids are just like, oh, they'll shake their head. And
yeah, it's appropriate for a dad.
It is. Or they'll send me some little meme or something like, that's totally you. It's just stuff like that. It's good.
So do you have anything to teach me?
I would say, because when we were talking about this earlier, I do like to cook.
Okay. You're a pretty slender guy to be. I wouldn't trust you to be a good cook.
Well, that's it. I've got another friend who is a chef, and he's a rather large individual, but and his food's good.
If a fat guy tells you he's a cook, you believe him. But a guy built like you?
Granted, I enjoy making the food from home, right? And it's simple. I think it's simple. There's nothing, but it's how it's prepared maybe. But, there's a lot of things, because when I was in college, even in high school, I worked in restaurants, whether I was busing or waiting when I was in college. And I always just found it interesting to just see what the chefs were doing. And I don't know if I ever wanted to be a chef, but it was just, I would ask questions and take it home and try different things. And I think a lot of it that I have fun doing is I know what I like, meaning a certain spice or this or that and herb. And so when I make something, I'll just try different things. And I mean, if it doesn't turn out very well, then throw it away, I guess. But
so what do you want to teach me?
I think the biggest fun I've had is with my Traeger grill.
Okay.
And tell you that, they have a recipe for 3-2-1 ribs in there, which is 3 hours smoked, 2 hours cooked, and 1 hour.
Tighten up the sauce.
Yeah. So like when you put it just finishes them up without being wrapped. So you put your barbecue sauce, and then you just continue to cook them at a low temperature so that barbecue sauce kind of tightens up on the meat.
So this is a 6-hour process, 3-2-1. Okay.
Yeah. I took that recipe because I think it calls for honey. You put a mustard before you smoke them, right? You put, I think it's apple juice and mustard, but I'll take Dijon mustard, and then you layer it on the ribs.
How about Grey Poupon?
Grey Poupon, or there's Boar's Head makes a real good one. Use that, smoke them up, and then 3 hours later, you put them in tinfoil. And it calls for brown sugar, honey, and apple juice again.
Okay.
So instead of the honey, I use maple syrup because my dad was real big on maple syrup. So I tried that, and that actually works real good. I find that it gives the meat a little bit more flavor to it.
Okay.
So that would say that's where I've changed their Traeger's recipe on that. But again, it's just adding whatever things that you like, So I'll smoke, so it's about a 6-hour process. But when they are done, they are fantastic.
Fantastic.
So I guess maybe next time I have a cert or gathering, I'll have to make some of those for everybody. But
yeah, if you come to our cert next year, we have a Traeger, and I bet your testers would love to sample it.
To sample that, yeah. Well, we'll have to do it, even if I have to have you do a few things at the beginning, just so that it doesn't take as long, because it's a long process. But
yeah,
and I've tried the other ones that are quicker, but for me, because I enjoy doing it, I don't mind taking the time to.
Sure.
Because you can let them smoke and do something else.
Well, like David says, it finishes up fantastic, and I think this is a great place to finish this podcast.
Well, great. Well, it's been a pleasure.
David, it is, I've known you for a long time, but getting to sit down like this, we haven't really got to do it, even though you've stayed at my house. But thank you for your time, and
welcome.
We sure
Thank
appreciate it. My great friend, Brian Mullen, CJF, ASF, has been an inspiration and beacon in the farrier industry like few others. He has no holes in his farrier game that he doesn't go after and fix with determination and grit. From business to shoemaking to trimming and theory, Brian Mullins is an all-around hand. As if that wasn't enough, Brian used his incredible voice and previous skills in the world of audio to bring our industry Mullins Farrier Podcast. If you have not had the pleasure of listening to it, you need to do that right now. Well, maybe listen to this episode first so I don't have to follow him up. He has been my motivation to give this podcasting thing a go and has helped me in every way that he can, offering a lot of advice as I try to figure out the next step. He even introduced me to Heather McPherson from Twisted Spur Media so that she can produce this show. Beyond that, he has read a couple of books in the audiobook form, not nearly as easy as one might think. You will find his voice as soothing and comforting as the rest of the world as you learn from my book, Gregory's Textbook of Farriery, and Andrew DeVisser's The Blacksmith's Guide to Financial Freedom. Check out mullinsfarrier.com to catch up on the podcast